Street Legal, Friday.
I'm Hillary Brown in Toronto. Welcome to our new viewers in Windsor. The CBC has suffered the biggest cuts in its history. 10 local television stations are closing, some like Windsor as of tonight. At least 1,100 people are losing their jobs. All local current affairs and special programs have been eliminated, effective immediately. CBC at 6 will be altered to cover news from southern Ontario. A bureau will remain open in Windsor. The massive cuts were announced today to all employees by CBC President Gérard Veilleux. Julie Van Dusen begins tonight's coverage from Ottawa.
I am truly sorry.
It was a sympathetic CBC president who broke the news to his employees this afternoon. As they gathered around to hear his closed-circuit address, they were told 1,100 jobs would soon disappear and CBC programming would never be the same.
I don't mind telling you that these decisions have given me many sleepless nights. After giving the matter a great deal of thought and looking closely at a wide range of options, I can only trust that we are doing the right thing for the CBC.
They are the most drastic cuts ever to the corporation. As of tonight, 10 regional stations cease production. The CBC will retain just one local TV news outlet in most provinces, which will be seen province-wide. As a viewer, here's what you can expect. In Alberta, Calgary's newscast will be axed and will be replaced by a province-wide show from Edmonton. CBC Saskatoon will lose its local news. It will be replaced by a newscast originating from Regina. In Ontario, Windsor will also lose its local newscast, and in Toronto, the station will close, but there will continue to be a Toronto local newscast administered by the network. But the French service will lose its outlet in Toronto. In Montreal and Quebec City, 2 local TV operations will be maintained, but in Sept-Îles, Matane, and Rimouski, they will be chopped. Local TV production will be chopped in Sydney, Nova Scotia, Corner Brook, Newfoundland, and Goose Bay, Labrador.
From CBC Ottawa, this is Newsday.
In the local stations that keep their newscasts, like CBOT in Ottawa, all local programs will be cut. In the House of Commons, outrage from the opposition. To the Prime Minister, Herb Gray said, "Enough is enough. CBC has already been cut to the bone."
If he believes in the unity of this country, will his government give the CBC today the money required to maintain these vital services it's cutting? Or is he saying to the people of Matane, of Windsor, of Sydney, that to him they're not part of Canada? If so, I say to the Prime Minister, they and Canadians will never, never accept this from him and his government.
But the Prime Minister said his government has given money to the CBC for a new headquarters to set up News World, the all-news channel. But there comes a time, he said, when restraint takes over.
That the CBC or any other government agency cannot function in isolation. We're all in this together, and we all must control expenditures so as to strengthen the economy in the longer haul.
And this Conservative MP, who also heads up the House of Commons Culture Committee, agreed with his boss.
The different networks that are there probably will enjoy this, where some stations are cut and compete against each other as opposed to the government CBC.
But the mayor of Windsor, who will lose the CBC station in his city, came to Ottawa today. He says he's disgusted.
Now I'm going home tonight having to tell my kids, my 4 children, and my wife that the for sale sign is up on southern Ontario and southern Canada, because there is no way that our community has any lifeline to Canadian culture anymore.
Today's announcement does not mean the end of cuts for the CBC. Gérard Veilleux says if the corporation does not receive more federal funds and if ad revenues don't increase, he will be forced to trim the budget by another $50 million in 1992-93. Julie Van Dusen, CBC News, Ottawa.
The axe fell heavily here in Toronto. The award-winning show Monitor is cancelled. Toronto After Hours is off the air. And as we reported, the local French-language news broadcast is also being eliminated. Paul Hunter is standing by with more. Paul?
Hillary, I'm outside the CBC offices and studios on Jarvis Street, where inside the news today hit everybody like a bomb. Those who still have their jobs, those who are now without jobs. Today's news affects everybody. It was a day of shock, dismay, and emotion at CBC Toronto. Everything except the CBC at 6 and 11 has been eliminated. It left staff with little to think about except the bad news.
The French language service in Toronto, the stations in Windsor, Saskatoon, and Calgary.
At Monitor, CBLT's award-winning current affairs show, it was business as usual this morning.
Hi, this week, the face of unemployment.
But soon, the story they had just begun editing would go unfinished forever. Monitor was cancelled.
I think that the things that make Canada distinct, among them, in my mind, was the CBC. And with the CBC being cut and cut and cut, Canada becomes less and less distinct.
At the French CBC station in Toronto, word spread quickly that it was shutting down, almost completely as of today.
What's happening with the pensions and compensation for layoffs and things like that?
Later, there was anger, where reporters were denied even a chance to say goodbye to their viewers. They have no show tonight.
I don't realize, I'm not able to realize what just happened here. It's unbelievable. We never thought that our station would be shut down. It doesn't make sense.
All but 4 of the TV staff at CBLFT is not expected back to work tomorrow. CBLT's entertainment show, Toronto After Hours, is gone as well.
I find it really discouraging. I think it's discouraging for CBC. I think it's discouraging for people who want to get into the business, people who are in the business, and for the arts community, the entertainment community, and the public as a whole.
And as word spread throughout the day, mixed with emotion and sorrow, for many is the fear of what will happen next.
It's possibly that the economy could rebound and our sales will go back up again. It's possible that the government funding would be increased. But at the moment, if nothing changes, either in the marketplace or with government funding, yes, a year from now, we have another financial problem.
And Hillary, there may be more financial problems to deal with this year, although CBC at 6 and 11 will stay on the air. There is a financial cutback to deal with at the CBC at 6 that is unknown how much that will be right now, but the notion of more layoffs at CBLT is not being ruled out.
All right, Paul, and the irony is, of course, that this comes at a time of record high viewer ratings for CBLT, for CBC at 6, which meant more money for the network, didn't it?
Absolutely. The ratings are higher than they've ever been, and advertising revenue is higher than it's ever been. $2 or $3 million last year. Denny Harvey was addressing the staff at CBLT this afternoon, and he said that that's already been factored in, the fact that viewership might go down because of this, and advertising revenue might go down, and there might be less money coming in. But that's all been factored into this decision to cut back at CBLT.
All right, Paul, thank you.
Okay.
Many of the CBC employees discovered yesterday that their shows were going off the air tonight. They found out after the National broke the story. Tonight, viewers in Windsor are finding out that they no longer have a local CBC newscast. Colleen McEdwards has the story on that station's last day.
Staff at CBC Windsor gathered in the studio to get the news they'd been dreading. And when the cuts came, they came quickly.
We are instructed that we will not have any more local television programs. We will not have a supper hour out of here tonight.
About 100 people work at the station full-time. 82 will lose their jobs. CBC Windsor has been turned into a news bureau. The main newscast will come from Toronto.
How are the people of the city of Windsor going to feel Canadian now? That they've lost their TV station.
The city's mayor feels betrayed. John Milson has promised letters of protest.
I don't even have a local newscast. That's devastating to our community.
It's not fair to us because a lot of people count on your station.
Well, I think it's a shame that won't be getting any more local Windsor news.
People in Windsor will now have to get most of their news from the Windsor Star newspaper. There's a CTV bureau here with one reporter, but no other television station.
I believe it's important for people in this community, for people in any community, to have access to as many outlets of information as they can possibly handle.
Employees here at CBC Windsor have been told they don't have to come to work anymore. We'll find out January 4th who will stay to staff the bureau and who will go. Colleen McEdwards, CBC News, Windsor.
And news of the CBC cuts has swept through our community. Kelly Crow was out today gauging the public reaction in Toronto.
Hillary, the people I talked to expressed shock, sadness, and resignation. But from some, there was a determination to fight back. This is the Sacré-Cœur French School in downtown Toronto. Most of the students here come from Franco-Ontarian families, families that fight to hang on to their French culture in a society where English dominates. For this school, Toronto's French news station was a focal point.
It's already difficult to operate a Franco-Ontarian school in Toronto. Now it's going to be so much worse. Like all our students are studying actualité, and they have to listen to the news. Like Radio-Canada is our main source of information. Now we're completely cut off from that.
How do we reach people now? Who's going to tell what's going on in Toronto with the Francophone? I don't know.
It's almost I can't believe my ears. I don't believe that this is really going to happen. It's such a surprise. And I know there should be cutbacks, but not cut off completely.
Over at the French paper L'Express, director François Bergeron says Metro's 100,000 Franco-Ontarians depended on the local French news.
The media, of course, is the most visible part of the French community. So, you know, the newspaper, the theater, the radio, the TV. So if you lose something like a TV station, which is the only TV station in French in Toronto, it's a big loss.
Michelle Landsberg is a Toronto Star columnist. She calls the cuts another blow to the country.
I'm absolutely heartsick, not just for the jobs that will be lost, that's terrible enough, but the CBC is vital to the fabric of Canada. What's left for this government to destroy?
Actor Gordon Pinsent says the regional stations helped unite this country.
And at a time when I think unity is going to be a major topic in this country, we seem to be shutting doors all around us. And I think this is another way of doing it. Necessary though it may be, I think it's just another punch in the gut for communications.
Gerald Kaplan chaired the Federal Task Force on Broadcasting in 1986. He says saving money by cutting regional stations is cutting the grassroots of the CBC.
Grassroots is Calgary local. Grassroots is Windsor local. That's where it is. We don't want Ottawa feeding the national news to the whole country. There's more to public broadcasting, and there's more to Canada than that.
On the streets in downtown Toronto, there was outrage and resignation.
It's absolutely a terrible thing for the country. Obviously, the priorities are all wrong. They're sending money to the Middle East instead of using it here in our country.
I have to assume that they have a severe financial problem, so they have to cut $100 million, I think, from their budget. That sounds like a dramatic move, but I suspect it has to be done.
There goes what Canadian culture is left, and I think it's just awful. We don't need any more American TV programs, American this, American that, and so what the CBC was still doing was very, very precious to Canada, and this is a tragedy. It's a real tragedy, and I'm very upset by it and disappointed.
Some aren't giving up. The group called Friends of Canadian Broadcasting is vowing to fight back.
I believe the outpouring of anger around some of this reduction in CBC's capacity today will mobilize a lot of people to tell the government that they care about strong public broadcasting.
The French community says it is already organizing its lobby to fight against these cuts. They're planning a letter-writing campaign to start. And on another note, the employment effects of these cuts are already being felt. The editor at L'Express told us this afternoon that he's already had 5 or 6 calls from French journalists looking for a job. Hillary?
All right, Kelly, thank you. And Ontario Premier Bob Rae lashed out at the federal government today. He says the cuts to the CBC are deplorable. And MPPs at Queen's Park demanded that the cutbacks be reversed. But Premier Rae admits that there is little the provincial government can do except try to talk to the federal government. Lynn Whittam reports.
This action represents almost the strangulation of the CBC.
Cabinet ministers and MPPs condemned the CBC cuts. Some were concerned about Windsor, where there is only one daily newspaper and without the CBC, no local television news. Liberal MPP Steve Mahoney says Windsor will be swamped by American programming. And not only that, he says, its economy will be hurt again.
More than 100 CBC employees will lose their jobs at a time when federal government's free trade and high interest rate policies are already causing severe economic problems in southwestern Ontario.
Liberal Lynn McLeod from Thunder Bay says her city will now be more isolated.
We know what a devastating effect cuts to via rail had, not only on our travel abilities, but on our sense of being a nation linked from sea to sea. Mr. Speaker, the cuts which we now understand are to be made by the CBC today will have an equally devastating effect.
And others were angry about the loss of CBLFT, the French-language regional news in Toronto. Bernard Grandmaître says the station is an important link for the French-speaking community.
And now that communication wire is broken. It's severed. So I think it's very irresponsible on behalf of Monsieur Maas to cut that communication link.
There were demands Queen's Park try to do something.
Given this outrageous action that chips away at our cultural unity, what do you, Mr. Minister, plan to do about this ripping apart at our cultural sovereignty?
I will be expressing my indignation to these cuts. I will.
The strongest term.
I will urge the federal government, through the minister and the prime minister, to restore funding to the CBC, and not only to restore, but to enhance the funding that they need.
Give it to him.
But it was Premier Ray who was angry at Prime Minister Mulroney. Ray says the timing of the cuts is wrong, especially when the country is going through constitutional problems.
And if he thinks that dismantling national institutions like the CBC is the way to contribute to national unity, he's very wrong. And I continue to believe that the vast majority of citizens in this country think that it's time we built up and strengthened our national institutions.
Lynn Whittam, CBC News, Queen's Park.
Part of the blame for today's massive cuts can be placed on the recession. Advertising revenues have fallen $50 million short of the national CBC target. And as Brenda Craig explains, the entire television industry is facing economic hard times.
Call traffic when you've got a minute.
Throughout the 1980s, the television industry boomed. Both public and private television expanded. Advertising delivered double-digit revenues year after year. But for the last 12 months or more, as the country slipped into recession, industry insiders say those same revenues have dropped 10 to 12%. And agencies who create and buy time for TV advertisers know the broadcasting industry has problems.
Radio stations, rep houses, been laying off people. It's tough out there. Mr. Wilson has said it. The R word, we're in a recession. Advertising budgets are one of the first ones to go.
This, as you know, has all happened in the last 3 months. The television marketplace has just almost collapsed in this country in the last few months. All television stations are in considerable trouble with their with sales. It's partly the economy, it's partly the unsureness of what's going to happen next year.
City TV says its ad revenues are in a slump, and the coming months look even worse as the recession lingers on. The CTV network and Bayton Broadcasting, which owns CFTO in Toronto, also admits to declining advertising dollars. At the same time, the cost of producing television is going up. If the CBC was going to make choices about how it's spending its budget and using its advertising dollars, Peggy Gross says it's best to save drama and entertainment and sacrifice local news.
I think the CBC has gone all out the last few years investing heavily in developing Canadian programming, and I personally think that's a great investment, and it should continue.
Meanwhile, the CBC is forecasting further drops in advertising dollars as the recession deepens.
We are predicting next year a drop of about $30 million from what we forecast a year or so ago. Mind you, those forecasts were made when the economy was very good.
In fact, the whole television industry, like other industries, is looking at a very difficult year in 1991. Brenda Craig, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up on CBC at 6, Toronto finds a place to store some of its garbage.
Obviously a red letter day in Metro's history. I don't think there's ever been a time when there was a potential to have over 20 years of waste disposal capacity available to us.
Thinner Breton.
Crisper Breton. Ultra Glide. High performance ironing.
Metropolitan Toronto may have found part of the solution to its massive garbage problem. Today, Metro Council signed a deal that will send millions of tons of garbage to a mine in Kirkland Lake. Our municipal affairs reporter, Hamlin Grange, has more.
Metro has been desperately looking for a solution to its garbage crisis. Today, it found a part of that solution. Under the deal signed today, Metro will send at least 1 million tons of garbage by train each year to the old Adams mine near Kirkland Lake. The mine is an open pit, much like this one in Marmora, Ontario. It can hold up to 30 million tons of garbage, enough to serve Metro for 20 years. The deal will cost Metro $362 million. The chairman of Metro's Works Committee says it's not only a great deal for Metro, it's the only deal.
Obviously a red letter day in Metro's history. You know, I don't think there's ever been a time when there was a potential to have over 20 years of waste disposal capacity available to us.
And it's a sweet deal for Kirkland Lake and the two nearby towns of Larder Lake and Englehart. Here's what they'll get from Metro. $600,000 each year in lieu of taxes, 150 full-time jobs, a $30 million recycling plant, $250,000 a year to do research on recycling.
Oh, sure, it's a sweet deal, but what I am more interested in is what we can gain in the spin-off sector, or the industries that can be developed.
People that have told us that it is going to be monitored and a group is going to be put together to help with monitoring right at the site.
It's almost like one man's garbage is another man's bank account. That's what seems to be happening here in terms of all the things you're going to be getting if this thing goes through.
Well, you could look at it that way. I don't call it garbage. I call it previously owned material.
Now all that stands in the way of Metro's plan is the provincial government. Before any garbage can be dumped in the mine, it must pass an environmental assessment, and that could take several years. Hamlin Grange, CBC News, Toronto.
Metro Police in Etobicoke have smashed a counterfeit money ring, but police warn that there are lots of phony bills still out there. The street crime unit in No. 2 District seized $500,000 in phony $100 American bills today. Officers say the bills are so fresh that the ink can still rub off. And police say that another $1.5 million in counterfeit bills are still in circulation. 4 men have been arrested. One of them is 26-year-old Vince Paterna of Woodbridge. Police say that more arrests are expected. The furor over the Ontario government's new rent control policy is showing no signs of going away. More and more landlords are coming forward claiming that the policy is unfair. They say that they can't continue to do repairs or maintenance on their buildings. Howard Gould is at Queen's Park with more. Howard?
Hillary, the policy was announced a week ago. Basically, there's a 2-year freeze on passing through the costs into rents for maintenance and repairs. A lot of landlords have been caught because they've done work and paid for it and now can't have the tenants pick up the bills. So opposition and landlords are not letting this die down, and today the housing minister let some of his anger show too.
The government came under attack today for the way it is treating the owners of these 3 apartment buildings in North York. The owners spent $1.5 million on repairs and renovations here, money spent just before the government announced its new policy.
Well, money went into elevators between the 3 buildings, over $600,000. The money went into boilers. The money went into plumbing.
The owners insist all the repairs were necessary. The buildings were all more than 20 years old.
The carpet was 25 years old, and this is the first time it had been replaced.
The landlords filed for rent review to pay for the repairs, but then the moratorium on extra rent increases was announced, and now they're not going to get the money.
We played by the rules all along, and we just don't understand how anyone can go and change them after the fact.
The rents that are being paid by tenants across this province should be going towards maintenance and upkeep of buildings. That's what rents are for.
In the House today, the case came up during question period.
She won't be able to recover 1 dime of these expenditures.
Back at 60 Ruddington, Tina Shikadans can't understand why the government won't let her add repair bills already paid to the rent.
These walls are plaster, and after 25 years, the plaster cracks.
The Minister of Housing can't believe anyone would suggest such a thing.
I can't believe that a member of the legislature would come here today and say that a landlord who spent money on fixing cracked plaster, that should result in increased rents for tenants. Give me a break.
And I would suspect that the landlords don't plan to give the housing minister a break, Hillary.
All right, Howard. Now, is this legislation set in stone? I mean, is there any recourse here?
Sure there is, and I think that's why we're hearing so much about it, because the opposition forced the government to let this go to committee. So there will be hearings and there will be a chance for them to try and turn the course. That's why the pressure is on, and that's why the landlords are promising to keep that on. The legislation won't actually be passed until the spring. Now, on one more matter, so Queen's Park signed Ontario's first land claim settlement with Native people today. Chiefs from 5 First Nations on Manitoulin and Cobourg Islands got a $9 million check from the provincial government. The money is payment for land surrendered to the Crown more than 100 years ago. The 5 Indian bands say they will use the money to improve their communities. And that is the story from Queen's Park tonight. Hillary?
All right, thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
The inquest into the death of Jimmy Whiffen has raised concerns about alcohol advertising on television. In its recommendations, the coroner's jury went so far as to say that all alcohol ads should be banned. Regina Hickel-Sabo has more on the Whiffen inquest and the fallout from it.
Jimmy Whiffen was 15 and 5'3". He died last May from an overdose of beer and tequila. Jury members examining his death recommended a host of measures, including that the ultimate objective should be to have all alcohol advertisements banned.
The moose. The wolf.
They target advertisements like these, ads that suggest you too can have fun and can be with it if you drink our beer. The jury also urged that the Government of Ontario should require all alcoholic beverages to contain a warning label that cautions the drinker that alcohol may be hazardous to health. Coincidentally, leaders of the health community are voicing those same concerns.
Alcohol is a poison. 2, it shows that children can die from it. And 3, it's really served to focus attention on the accessibility, the easy accessibility of children to alcohol.
Kendall recently took aim at the hard liquor producers, at the distilling industry, in a brief to the Canadian Radio and Television Commission. Distillers aren't allowed to advertise on television, but they're asking the CRTC for the right to grab their share of the air. Kendall wants a total ban on alcohol ads, and he says the Whiffen inquest has helped.
What are your chances of persuading the CRTC to eliminate alcohol advertising?
Alone, probably not very good, but with the groundswell of public support that is now apparent, I think probably pretty good.
Even the Federal Health Department warned the CRTC about current alcohol advertising. The emphasis on drinking at bars and parties may suggest a practice which, if more frequently adopted, could perpetuate current drinking-related problems, such as drinking while impaired. But frustrated distillers who've watched their industry shrink steadily for the past 10 years say they only want the chance to show that a liquor drink is just as potent as a bottle of beer or glass of wine.
We're a little puzzled, the fact that we'd receive such negative response on such a subject when we, in fact, believe that we are making a contribution to society by helping develop a better understanding for the responsible use of our products.
Tomorrow afternoon, Toronto's Board of Health will discuss the dangers of alcohol advertising. And Coroner Murray Neighbourg, the man who presided over Jimmy Whiffen's inquest, will be there. It's expected he'll personally urge that all alcohol advertising be banned from the airwaves. Regina Hickel-Sabo, CBC News, Toronto.
And let's go over to the newsroom now, where our sports editor Bruce Dobigan has news of a huge trade for the Toronto Blue Jays. Bruce?
That's right, Hillary. And first of all, I'd like to welcome our Windsor viewers. I know we can't replace the service you've had in the past, but we hope we'll do our best to keep you informed all the same. Well, let's call him Stan Back-Gillick now, not Stan Pat. The Blue Jays general manager today, shedding that dowdy image. He made a blockbuster trade at the winter meetings in Chicago. He sent all-stars Tony Fernandez and Fred McGriff, the first baseman, to San Diego in exchange for Joe Carter and second baseman Roberto Alomar. Now, Fernandez has been, of course, a leather magician at shortstop in the American League for years, Golden Glover, but apparently the Blue Jays have tired of his temperamental nature and his erratic offense. Manny Lee will take over at shortstop. That's a real gamble after he failed to produce last year at second. The movie of McGriff, he's hit 135 homers in 3 years. Well, that'll open the way for John Olerud to play first base. Huge sacrifice, however, and the pressure on Olerud will be considerable to take over from a man who many think is the best power hitter to to come into the baseball since Willie McCovey. Now Joe Carter, the man they're getting over from San Diego, he's an outfielder, can play center field and right field. And he is a proven RBI man. He was in the American League when he was with Cleveland, where we see him here. He plays all the outfield positions. He's a leader, too. That's something the Jays are desperate for, of course, leadership in the dugout and a little bit of production when the money's on the line. The other man they picked up is a great young player. His name is Roberto Alomar. His brother, Sandy Alomar, is a catcher for Cleveland, and he'll take over second base for the Blue Jays, and he'll probably be the leadoff man they've looked for a long time. Speed and on-base percentage from Roberto Alomar. Jays also announcing today they signed a free agent, first baseman Pat Tabler, to a 2-year deal, and he will be a DH for the Blue Jays over the next couple of years. Pressure on George Bell there to sign for what the Blue Jays want. And he'll be back with more sports news later.
Still to come on CBC at 6, the highlights from round 3 of the Gemini Awards.
And drama. And I wanted a chance to say in this environment to a lot of the people who are responsible for making that happen how enormously proud I am of the Canadian men and women who have learned to make drama on television that can rank with the best in the world.
Presenting this week's great news from Sears, starring a women's luxurious cotton terry robe and matching towel together at half price, just $52.99 for the gift set. Sears, your money's worth and more.
Nova Histex, adult strength cough syrup.
When I look like this, my guys challenge me to lose 20 pounds.
Me, Tommy Lasorda, the guy who loves to eat.
Well, I lost 30 pounds in 3 months with the Ultra Slim Fast weight loss plan. It was easy. I had a delicious shake for breakfast, one for lunch, and then a wholesome dinner. And I didn't feel hungry. The pounds dropped off. Isn't that great?
You know, this is the first time I ever lost anything and felt good about it.
Ultra Slim Fast. Give us a week, we'll help you lose weight.
They call it the holiday season. But things sure move fast for a holiday. Going from store to store, who's got the time? Well, my Guardian drugstore makes it a little easier. They've got what I'm looking for at prices I appreciate. Like Kleenex tissues, box of 300, just $1.29 with flyer coupon. And Noma Christmas mini light sets, just $4.49. Guardian, it's the drugstore I need.
How you doing? I'm Rudolph from Mark's Work Warehouse. Our skating parties used to be chilly here at the North Pole. Now you can get Mountain Gear Solar Fleece from Mark's Work Warehouse. Perfect outerwear for any season. Warm and cozy, a rainbow of colors in styles for the whole family. Starting at just $39.99. Take it from me and the boss. It's a guarantee that Mark's Work Warehouse has Christmas gifting all wrapped up.
Presenting this week's great news from Sears, starring a women's luxurious cotton terry robe and matching towel together at half price, just $52.99 for the gift set. Sears, your money's worth and more.
Ona Fletcher and the CBC at 11. News for the 90s.
I'm Al.
And I'm George.
The warped comedy of Al and George, and behind the scenes with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. That's Friday on Toronto After Hours.
I'm Beth Harrington. Well, if it isn't obvious to some people, the CBC provides a service that many Canadians actually take for granted. Just witness this year's 3 nights of Gemini Awards. CBC swept this year's awards, but the victory was bittersweet. Justin Smallbridge was there and has this report.
What is this? Well, it's meant to be taken as entertainment, kind of like tonight's Gemini Awards, mercifully the last of 3 straight days of schmoozing and fatuous flattery. How much independent production could have been financed with the money spent on this exercise? We'll never know. With this afternoon's announcements that the government plans to whack 10 CBC stations out of the network, tonight's affair had an ugly undercurrent of eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Here are a few of the winners.
Dave Foley, Bruce McCullough, Kevin McDonald, Mark McKinney, and Scott Thompson, the kids in the hall.
The winner is Peter Mansbridge, the National Peter Mansbridge compilation.
Go ahead, you do it.
Brian Williams, 14th Commonwealth Games.
And the members of the Academy have chosen to honor with this year's Gemini ENG.
Michelle St. John.
And of course, this celebration of the so-called best in Canadian television is itself a TV program. Such entertainment as there was consisted of things like this, the Nylons, introduced as the sound of the 90s. That's a great description for a foursome that hasn't had any substantial record sales in at least 5 years, doing a cover of an early 1970s pop tune in a 50s style. The director and supervising producer of this extravaganza both used to work in this country, but fled to Los Angeles, where the climate, in every sense of that word, is better. But isn't it touching, though, that they came back for this gig?
Gemini Award. Let's make this whole thing just a shambles.
And that's about just what it was. And that's a brief but sad entertainment section tonight. And now here's a look at a few things happening in Toronto this evening.
Coming up on CBC at 6, the deadline draws near for major reforms in world trading.
We've been in this conference now for 3 days. During that time, we've had no serious negotiations about agriculture.
Let's see. That's my number. Or that. Ooh, I like that number.
I have no idea what to get you for Christmas.
Why not look through this? It might help.
Shop the consumer's distributing catalog for your number. It's the smart way to shop.
Love, I've been dreaming of this special evening. I found the man of my dreams when I found you. And when I surrender to a tasty kiss or two.
Martini and Rossi Asti.
Yes, you do.
4 sparkling moments.
Face it, most modestly priced batteries have a lot to be modest about. But not Encore. It's from Eveready. It's mercury-free, and it gives you more power than you pay for. Hey, life's too short for anything less. Well, okay. Hey, hold it down. Just the highlights, okay? It's from Eveready. It's mercury-free, and it gives you more power than you pay for. Thank you.
Hey, the best gifts at Canadian Tire are Scrooge approved. They're great gifts, and since I approve them, you know the prices are low.
This Sega Genesis video game system, just $199.99 with your Canadian Tire Flyer coupon. And this Casio keyboard, Scrooge approved at only $299.99.
These Scrooge-approved gifts sure put you in the Christmas spirit. Keep the change. No, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Canadian Tire lets you give like Santa and save like Scrooge.
So we put in this new furnace, and our bills are really
down.
Exactly.
Must be a Lennox.
Introducing the new Whisper Heat, the quietest furnace in its class and one of the most reliable.
Congratulations, George. As winner of the prestigious Dave Lennox Award, Applewood Air Conditioning is proud to be one of the largest and best dealers in Canada.
So for sales and service, second to none, the only name you need to know is Applewood.
Attaboy, Dave.
Order the classic, 12 long stem roses, $24.95. Or the ultimate, 24 long stem roses, $36.95. The phone number, 5FLOWER, When you're thinking of a florist, dial 5 flower.
A suspected coup leader in Panama has been recaptured. Yesterday, Eduardo Herrera escaped from a prison on the island of Naus. Today, Herrera and as many as 100 armed followers seized control of a police headquarters in Panama City. U.S. troops immediately surrounded the building. Herrera is a former high-ranking officer in the Panamanian Army. He was jailed in October on charges of conspiring against the American-backed government of President Guillermo Endara. Herrera was arrested after he fled the headquarters and tried to take refuge in a nearby neighborhood. Overseas, the GATT talks are dead. At least that is what some negotiators are saying in Brussels. Officials with the economic community say they won't improve their offer to cut farm subsidies by noon tomorrow. That was the deadline given by the chairman of the World Trade Talks. Jonathan Charles reports.
The European Community ministers met in emergency session tonight under pressure to come up with new negotiating positions on agriculture and 4 other key sectors of the trade talks. Many of the ministers were angry, accusing the Americans of refusing to talk about anything until the agriculture question is settled. Britain's minister makes it clear that discussions are now in the balance.
What is now the problem is to get the Americans to realize that they can't behave in this extraordinary fashion, that the whole idea of this conference is to reach agreement across a spectrum of subjects. The president of the whole conference has put forward very sensible proposals, which he sounded people out on in advance, and then they vetoed it. We can't have that.
But when the American Agriculture Secretary, Clayton Reuter, left the talks a short while ago, he denied that he'd refused to negotiate on everything, but once again underlined that agriculture had to be tackled first. Other delegations have also indicated that farm subsidy cuts must be top of the agenda.
For all practical purposes, the Uruguay round is at the present moment dead in the water, and there is very little signs of revival.
The war of words between the EC and the other nations involved is getting more vitriolic, the atmosphere worsening tonight. Further talks, this time in secret, are starting now, a last-minute attempt to narrow the gap. Although the chairman of these talks has given a deadline of midday tomorrow, British officials believe the situation is now so bad that discussions may break down tonight. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Brussels.
Week rather look at the weather out on the west coast. It continues to rain in BC and still a little light snow falling on PEI. Here in southern Ontario, well, at least the weather wasn't all that bad. Let's have a look at our systems map. Here's the way it shapes up tonight. From top to bottom, all the way from James Bay down to about the Gulf of Mexico. Ridge of high pressure. And out of that today, quite a strong northwesterly flow. And in the lee of Georgian Bay and Lake Huron, we had anywhere between 15 and 30 centimeters of snow. The city of London reporting 22 centimeters of snow. In the lower lakes region, just a few flurries out of this disturbance. Tonight, it gives us some partial clearing. Then it gradually drifts off to the east. In behind it, a southwesterly flow of warmer air. And there you can see the leading edge, the red line, the warm front, just hanging to the west of the Great Lakes region, plugging into a center of low. And in behind that low, another outbreak of some cooler air. So we get a little cloud out of that, a warm front as it moves through tomorrow, and then a chance of a little light dusting of snow across much of southern Ontario as the cold front moves in for Friday. A look at Ontario today, here in the south. For the most part, cloudy skies, although there were a few sunny intervals. And again, a few flakes around, most of it confined to the north of us in the ski country. The wind chill factor this afternoon made it feel like it was about -9 degrees, with the temperature really all the way from Windsor to Kingston running around -2. To the north of us, North Bay, partly cloudy this afternoon, along with Sudbury at -8 degrees. Nice sunny day at the nation's capital. Temperatures not far from -7. Up in Gold Country, Timmins, Kapuskasing, Cochrane, cloudy and not far from -10 degrees. Thunder Bay, sunny, and look at that. On the plus side, they went by 1 degree. Back under the plus, down to the minus at -4 this afternoon. Little light snow through the Lake of the Woods area. Put it all together. Here's the way the forecast shapes up for tonight. Variable skies, in and out of sunshine and cloud. The winds have now shifted out of the northwest, so the snow streamers up in ski country today have been cut off. The winds swing around to the southwest at about 30 kilometers an hour overnight. The overnight low holding at a -3. For tomorrow, the variable conditions continue. A little sun, a little cloud, westerly winds at about 40, and tomorrow's high on the plus side by 1 degree. Then for Friday, as I mentioned, increasing cloudiness again, some light snow developing late in the afternoon, and the high on Friday, -3. For the weekend, a mix is in again on Saturday. Some sun, some cloud, on the plus side at 4 degrees. Can you believe it? The second Sunday, December, sunny, and not far from 8 degrees. That's in the future. Overnight, we expect variable conditions on the cool side, down to -3. And then for tomorrow, the mix continues, some sun, some cloud, and a high not far from 1. And Hillary, that's a midweek look at the weather.
All right, Bill, thank you. This is CBC at 6. Still ahead, more sports with Bruce Dobigan.
That's right, Hillary. A little warmer down south in Florida, where the NHL governors are awarding some new franchises for their leagues.
We did. We put not 1,000 hours or 2,000. We put tens of thousands of hours of work into this. It's been an unbelievable effort.
This Saturday is no ordinary Saturday at Sears. It's Santa's Super Saturday. And remember, our fantastic deferred payment offer makes shopping even easier. Don't miss Santa's Super Saturday at Sears. Your money's worth and more.
She sells seashells by the seashore. Now you try one, Mom.
Peter Piper pick.
If chewing gum sticks to your dental work.
Peter Piper pick. A pack of...
If chewing gum sticks to your dental work, try non-stick Freedent. Regular or new sugar-free. Freedent's the one that tastes great and won't stick. Won't stick.
How you doing? I'm Rudolph from Mark's Work Warehouse. Our skating parties used to be chilly here at the North Pole. Now you can get mountain gear solar fleece from Mark's Work Warehouse. Perfect outerwear for any season. Warm and cozy, a rainbow of colors in styles for the whole family. Starting at just $39.99. Take it from me and the boss. It's a guarantee that Mark's Work Warehouse has Christmas gifting all wrapped up.
Miracle's grocery department is stocked daily with Canada's leading brands, which keeps things moving on the shelf, out the door. Miracle means fresh. Miracle's bulk food section offers up to 200 different varieties, and all stock is rotated regularly, from snacks to coffee. Because Miracle means fresh.
When it's just you and the road, Dunlop D40 M2 tires perform. Road and track tests prove it. You can read about it here, or I can show you. Dunlop really performs. In Road and Track's dry braking and wet braking tests, Dunlop finished first. When it comes to handling, cornering, and overall performance, it's Dunlop that really performs. So put yourself on Dunlop tires. Dunlop outperforms.
Usually we sell wheels, but for the holidays I gave some. These Muppet Baby Connectables from McDonald's. Lovable Earl got Baby Kermit. Evan, Baby Gonzo, because he's different. Max got Baby Fozzie, because he tells the best jokes. Not now, Max. And for me, I kept Baby Miss Piggy, because I'm so perfect.
Muppet Baby Connectables at McDonald's, 59 cents each. Connectable, collectible, a different one each week for someone special.
This Saturday is no ordinary Saturday at Sears. It's Santa's Super Saturday. And remember, our fantastic deferred payment offer makes shopping even easier. Don't miss Santa's Super Saturday at Sears. Your money's worth and more.
Well, those NHL governors are no fools. When they have a meeting in the middle of the winter, they have it down in Florida, and they're deciding on NHL expansion currently. Hamilton and Ottawa are the two Canadian cities hoping against hope, really, that the NHL will give them a franchise for the princely sum of only $50 million each. We have this report from Dan Sagan in Florida.
The Ottawa bid, win or lose, has been the talk of these meetings. The thoroughness of their application and their avid cheerleading section has not gone unnoticed. The Senators were the third group in to meet the NHL Board of Governors this morning. 63 minutes later, they emerged. Jim Durrell and an optimistic Bruce Firestone leading the way.
It went well.
We did as well as we possibly could. No one could have worked harder than we did. We put not 1,000 hours or 2,000. We put tens of thousands of hours of work into this. It's been an unbelievable effort. We can't do any more than we've done.
As for the other bids, all three Florida applications now look solid. Tampa Bay's found some new money. St. Petersburg, though, still leads the way there. San Diego and Anaheim won't be ready till at least 1996. Seattle effectively withdrew this morning, citing lack of an ownership group, and that leaves Hamilton.
Our application to be a member of the league is solid. We have the lease in place. We have the support of the Tim Hortons system. We have the capital. We have, as you all know, over 16,000 reservations for season tickets. I think all those speak well for our application.
And speaking well might be about all that happens. I hope that they get a franchise in both Hamilton and Ottawa, but this current feeling is that the NHL will not award any of the expansion franchises this time around because nobody really is prepared to get going next year. Well, speaking of hockey, Toronto Maple Leafs, it's catch-up time for the Leafs in the next 2 days. The last-place Leafs have a home-and-home series with the Minnesota North Stars. They trail the North Stars in the Norris Division by 7 points, and the Leafs forward Kevin Maguire knows the importance of this kind of series.
Probably our biggest series of the year so far. After having such a bad start, we figure we can get ourselves right back in it if we win both these games. If not, then we got to win at least one.
Win again, at least one is for sure. And as I say, tonight the Maple Leafs taking on the Minnesota North Stars down at Maple Leaf Gardens. That'll be at 7:30 game time. The Leafs will then go to Bloomington for tomorrow night's game, 8:30, and of course we'll have highlights of both of those games for you right here on CBC at 6 and CBC at 11. Well, as we told you earlier, it's been a massive day, a blockbuster day at the winter meetings in Rosemount, Illinois, the baseball meetings. Let's take a look at the trades that were made first. First of all, of course, the one we told you about earlier, a blockbuster for the Toronto Blue Jays. They sent perennial All-Stars Tony Fernandez and Fred McGriff, the first baseman and the shortstop. They are heading over to the San Diego Padres in exchange for Joe Carter, mighty Joe Carter, and Roberto Alomar. Alomar, a terrific second baseman, and he will really fit in there for the Blue Jays. He will, of course, replace Manny Lee, who moves over to replace Tony Fernandez at shortstop. Fred McGriff, a huge sacrifice for Blue Jays to make, of course, but they will move John Olerud in there. And Pat Tabler, a free agent signing, will hopefully be equated in there as well. One other major trade we can tell you about today. Last night, the San Francisco Giants, they traded Dave Righetti, formerly of the New York Yankees. They signed him to a free agent deal, and that meant Steve Bedrosian, their former ace, is freed up, and Steve Bedrosian today was traded to the Minnesota Twins in exchange for 2 minor league pitchers in a deal there. It was a day of big signings today as well at the major league meetings. A lot of teams getting out the checkbooks and getting those baseball stars under contract. The Mets today made all the news in terms of the signing. They signed Vince Coleman, the former speedster of the St. Louis Cardinals. He will bat leadoff and be the man at the top of the order for the Mets, hopefully replacing Darryl Strawberry in the hearts of Met fans. He signed for 4 years, $12 million. That's, of course, $3 million a year. The Reds managed to re-sign second baseman Bill Doran. The Blue Jays were interested in Doran. When Doran signed with the Cincinnati Reds, that made them go after Roberto Alomar in the big deal with the Padres. The Brewers signed Franklin Stubbs, a man the Expos were interested in. Stubbs, a left-handed hitting outfielder. The Expos were looking for him perhaps to beef up their lineup from the left-handed side. And speaking of left-handed hitters, the Pittsburgh Pirates today losing Sid Bream, the first baseman. Pirates desperately wanted to keep him, but the Atlanta Braves went out and got Bream. 3 years, $9 million is what it cost to get Sid Bream under contract. And, of course, Sid Bream can go and hold the hand there of Nick Esaski, who missed all last year after signing a free agent contract with the Braves. They have no luck whatsoever. And we'll be back with highlights on CBC at 11 tonight. Back to you, Hillary.
All right, Bruce, thank you. And updating our top story tonight, the CBC has suffered the deepest cuts in its history. 10 local television stations are closing, including this one, CBLT, though CBC at 6 remains on the air covering news for Southern Ontario. The massive cuts to the 10 stations means an end to all local production by CBC. With more on reaction from the regions, we go to Patricia Chu.
News of the closures came as a shock to CBC employees. Bob Nicholson found out last night, just moments before going to air.
I just got that like 1 second before I had to read it, so I was like, ugh. So what happens to us is the question that everybody's asking in this room tonight.
What happens is layoffs for all but 5 of the 90 Calgary employees. The station now becomes a mini bureau for Edmonton.
Shocked, surprised, totally in disbelief.
At Toronto's French language station, employees came in today only to be told to pack up and leave.
Let me just start so you see the regional.
In Newfoundland, employees gathered to hear that 70 have lost their jobs, and the Goose Bay station is closed.
To come along and tell us that we're not even allowed to finish off our season, to the people that we've gone out and did interviews with and done shows that count to us and matter to people out in our audience.
Rumors began to fly last night, but it was only this afternoon that employees found out for sure that their jobs are now gone.
I think it's really shitty that I had to find out on the national news last night that my station was closing. And I think it's really shitty that I didn't learn that I had no job tomorrow until 5 minutes before I had no job tomorrow.
For those who survived today's bloodletting, there's little comfort. With more cuts expected, many feel it's just a matter of time.
For every 10 people in a room, one of them's going to be gone, and they don't know who, and won't know for a month, and that's not right. That's absolutely unfair and unreasonable.
We had no idea it was going to be anything like this.
Patricia Chu, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is CBC at 6 for Wednesday, December the 5th. Thank you for watching. I'm Hillary Brown. Good night.
Hey, the best gifts to Canadian Tire are Scrooge.